In the profound quiet of an Ohio summer night, a single sharp crack shattered the peace. It was a sound wholly alien to the hushed fields, a violent tremor that echoed for a moment before the silence, deeper and colder, rushed back in. Among the Amish, life moved in harmony with the land, with faith, and with an unspoken understanding of peace. But in one home, on one night, that harmony was irrevocably broken. A secret, nurtured in the shadows, had finally erupted into the light, leaving behind a devastation no prayer could mend. Before we delve into this chilling account, tell us in the comments below, where are you tuning in from today? Now, let's journey into the heart of that silence. The profound quiet that had once settled over Apple Creek, Ohio, was not merely an absence of noise. It was a palpable presence, a deep-seated rhythm born from generations of prayer, honest labor, and an unwavering commitment to a way of life. In the year 2009, this community, a serene tapestry of rolling farmlands, meticulously kept homes, and roads where horse-drawn buggies moved like hushed shadows, maintained a pulse seemingly untouched by the frenetic churn of the world beyond its carefully drawn borders. The air itself often carried a complex mosaic of scents, the rich, earthy perfume of freshly tilled soil after a spring rain, the comforting warmth of baking bread wafting from kitchen windows, and on occasion, the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer from a hidden workshop. Here, life unfolded in plain sight, its values worn as openly as the modest, dark garments that adorned its people, a testament to simplicity, devout faith, and communal harmony. Within this landscape, a plain wooden structure, built with sturdy, unpainted timber, stood as the home of the Weaver family. It was indistinguishable in its fundamental design from its neighbors, yet held its own subtle markers of identity, perhaps the particular shade of green on its window frames, a faint discoloration on the porch where children had often played, or the scattered collection of wooden toys near the front steps, a small, crudely carved horse, an overturned wagon, a cloth doll lying face down in the grass, forgotten after a day's play. Barbara Weaver, at 30 years of age, moved through these familiar spaces with a quiet grace, an almost silent efficiency that mirrored the community's highest ideals. Her days were a meticulously woven tapestry of devotion and domestic duty, each thread carefully placed. The first blush of the rising sun often found her already in the kitchen, its soft, early light illuminating her long, dark dress, the pristine white apron cinched at her waist, and the delicate lace cap that framed her face, concealing her hair entirely. Her hands, bearing the subtle calluses of ceaseless work, but retaining a remarkable gentleness in their touch, moved with practiced ease. They kneaded dough until it yielded, folded crisp linens into precise, neat squares, mended worn fabrics with meticulous, almost invisible stitches, and churned butter with steady, rhythmic strokes. She was a constant, soothing presence among her 5 children, her voice a low, melodic hum of instruction, comfort, and often prayer. She guided the eldest son through his chores, patiently taught the younger girls the art of mending, and offered quiet reassurance to the boisterous middle sons. The youngest, a baby still nestled in his crib beside the marital bed, stirred only rarely, his infant cries quickly soothed by the reassuring proximity of his mother, by the gentle touch of her hand or the soft cadence of her singing a hymn. To all who observed her, whether during Sunday services at the meeting house or in the quietude of her daily chores, Barbara was the very embodiment of a virtuous Amish woman, a pillar of unwavering faith, tireless industry, and profound obedience. Her life, steeped in tradition and dedicated service, served as a quiet, living testament to the community's steadfast principles, an unblemished example of purity and devotion. Yet, within the same 4 walls of that seemingly peaceful home, amidst the familiar sounds of a busy household and the pervasive scent of faith, another presence stirred with a distinctly different kind of energy. Eli Weaver, at 33, possessed a striking youth and a handsomeness that seemed almost out of place, subtly at odds with the backdrop of deliberate simplicity that defined their world. His gaze, often caught in moments of quiet contemplation or during social gatherings, was frequently described as restless by those who occasionally observed him. It held a subtle flicker of something unquiet, a spark of vanity that seemed to defy the humility expected of an Amish man. When the eyes of women, whether from within the community or those passing through from the outside world, lingered on him for a beat too long, a subtle shift in his posture, a slight tilt of his head, or a momentary hesitation in his movements would betray a silent acknowledgement. It was a conscious awareness of his own appeal, a soft, almost imperceptible preening that pulsed just beneath the surface of his plain attire, an undeniable contrast to the world of self-restraint and adherence to tradition that so rigorously defined his existence. He worked the fields alongside other men, his broad shoulders moving with practiced strength as he guided the plow or lifted heavy bales of hay. He performed his duties diligently, yet sometimes a faint tension in his jaw or a distant, unfocused look in his eyes hinted at a mind far from the fertile soil beneath his feet. He would often withdraw from conversations, his responses terse, his gaze drifting towards the distant tree lines, as if searching for something just beyond the horizon of their world docked from the outside. To the casual observer, the Weaver marriage presented a picture of idyllic stability, a union seemingly forged in faith and family, an unblemished example of communal harmony. The house often resonated with the joyful sounds of children's play during the day, fading into the quiet industry of evening chores, punctuated by shared meals at a sturdy wooden table. These were accompanied by murmured prayers, the soft lamplight casting long shadows, and the gentle, often simple conversations of a family bound by a shared heritage. Barbara's soft replies, Eli's occasional nods, the shared responsibilities, all contributed to this outward appearance. But beneath this meticulously maintained veneer of peace, within the thick wooden walls that had absorbed the echoes of whispered goodnights and morning blessings for years, the very air had grown heavy, thick with unspoken desires and divergent currents. Barbara found her solace in the steadfast rhythm of her days, in the comforting, predictable routine of her home, and in the unwavering tenets of her deep, abiding faith. She found peace in repetition, in the sacred cycle of daily life. Eli, however, seemed to breathe a different air, a subtle, constant yearning for a freedom that stretched far beyond the fenced-in fields and the tightly knit bonds of his community. More than mere freedom, there was a palpable hunger for something else, something unnamed, a longing that bordered on raw, unbridled desire. He maintained the outward appearance of a loving husband, a devoted father, diligently performing his duties within the community, attending meetings, participating in barn raisings. But as the quiet hours of night descended, cloaking the county in a profound, uninterrupted sleep, Eli harbored a secret, a transgression so severe, so utterly forbidden, that if ever brought to light, it promised not just expulsion from the church, not merely excommunication, but an almost complete erasure from the very narrative, the very history of the Amish people, hidden away, concealed with a meticulousness born of intense fear and a potent, forbidden thrill. A small device existed, a cellular phone. For any other man in the bustling modern world, such an item would be unremarkable, a mere tool of convenience, a ubiquitous extension of daily life. But within the strictly drawn confines of the Amish way of life, its mere possession was akin to a forbidden pact, a silent covenant with the devil's temptations. Its very presence was an act of profound defiance, a direct rejection of the principles that governed their existence, a symbol of the ultimate worldly corruption. It was through this small, luminous screen that Eli Weaver began to reach out. His initial attempts were cautious, hesitant, each tap of his fingers imbued with a palpable risk, a quick glance over his shoulder at imaginary watchers. Then, gradually, his confidence grew, morphing into a calculated boldness as he established clandestine connections with the unseen world beyond his fields. Deep in the dead of night, only after the last lantern had been extinguished, its wick carefully trimmed, and the soft, even breathing of his sleeping family filled the quiet rooms, the rustle of Barbara turning in bed, the faint whimpers of the youngest child, the deeper snores of the older boys, would Eli retrieve the device. Sometimes it was hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the corner of his workshop, buried deep under a pile of sawdust. Other times it was meticulously wrapped in an old oil-stained cloth, tucked away in a seldom-used tool chest in the furthest corner of the barn, amidst the comforting scent of hay and horse manure. The act of reaching for it, the slight tremor in his hand, was a ritual of dangerous secrecy. The dim, unnatural glow of the screen, carefully shielded beneath a blanket or a cupped hand, cast an eerie light onto his face, illuminating the stark contrast between his quiet Amish life and the Forbidden's digital world. This glow reflected his initial tentative steps into a perilous double life. Each muted click of a button, each whispered word into the receiver, if he dared speak, his voice barely audible above the chirping crickets, was a profound act of rebellion, a transgression that chipped away at the very foundations of his faith and the fragile peace of his family. The quiet fumbling, the almost imperceptible hum of the device, the constant, knowing fear of discovery, all formed a ritual of dangerous secrecy, an addiction to the thrill of the Forbiddens. This small rectangular object was not merely a phone. It was a literal and metaphorical portal to a Forbidden's world, a stark, buzzing contrast to the profound silence and pervasive darkness of the Amish night. The mere thought of its existence, if ever discovered, was enough to send shivers through the most steadfast members of the community, cementing the understanding that its possession was considered nothing short of a pact with the devil himself, a betrayal of everything they held sacred. Through this Forbidden's portal, Eli began to browse, to observe, to slowly absorb images and words from a world he was meant to shun entirely. The initial timid curiosity soon blossomed into a bolder resolve, leading him to make the first tentative, then increasingly confident, contacts. He sought out connection, a resonance with desires he felt stifled by the rigid boundaries of his upbringing, and in doing so, he started to construct a parallel existence, a secret self. The sense of danger was ever present, a constant companion that delivered a potent cocktail of adrenaline and fear, mingling with an intoxicating thrill that pulsed through his veins. Each message sent, each connection forged, was a step further into a new, dangerous world, a landscape of hidden desires and perilous possibilities. He learned to navigate this new terrain with a practiced stealth, his fingers dancing across the tiny keypad, composing messages in the dark, his breath held. These clandestine contacts, whispered into the digital ether in the deepest hours of the night, began to subtly reshape his double life, sowing the insidious seeds of future conflict and setting in motion a chain of events that would eventually unravel the very fabric of his existence, and the quiet sanctity of Apple Creek, forever breaking its profound, sacred silence. Eli Weaver's clandestine cellular phone, a glowing rectangle of defiance held against the stark, plain backdrop of his life, became more than a mere device. It was a carefully guarded portal, a clandestine gateway to a world of forbidden desires and unchecked self-expression. In the quiet solitude of night, after the household had surrendered to the profound depths of sleep, the subtle rustle of Barbara turning in bed, the faint, almost imperceptible whimpers of the youngest child, the deeper, rhythmic snores of the older boys, Eli would meticulously retrieve the phone from its various hiding places. Sometimes it was tucked beneath a loose board in the floor of his small workshop, where the scent of wood shavings and oil lingered. Other times it was meticulously wrapped in an old, oil-stained cloth, buried deep within a pile of old tools in the furthest, darkest corner of the barn, where the comforting scent of hay and manure masked any lingering technological trace. The light from its screen, carefully shielded under a heavy blanket or within the cup of his hand, cast an eerie, shifting glow across his face, transforming his features in the dark. In these stolen moments, observed by no living soul, Eli Weaver, the dutiful Amish man, began to shed his prescribed identity. He embraced another, one he cultivated with careful deliberation, the Amish Stud. This digital persona, crafted through anonymous profiles on various online platforms, became his primary conduit to the outside world, a dangerous experiment in personal freedom. His messages, composed in the hushed hours when only the crickets and distant wind stirred, carried a confident, almost brazen tone, a stark and startling contrast to the deferential speech expected of him in daylight hours. He sought a different kind of connection, not of the spiritual or communal kind that defined his daily existence, but a raw, unvarnished desire that hummed beneath the surface of his carefully constructed life. Each interaction, each response he received from the anonymous women beyond his fields, was a potent dose of validation, an intoxicating affirmation of a self he dared not reveal to anyone in Apple Creek. The thrill of transgression mingled with a growing sense of power, a feeling of mastery over his own hidden narrative, a quiet rebellion. His quest was not merely for fleeting encounters or anonymous flirtation, but for a deeper, more profound sense of release, a liberation from the strictures of faith and family that, he felt, had begun to chafe and constrict him. He yearned for something more, a boundless expanse of possibility where his restless eyes could truly roam, where his vanity could be seen and acknowledged without the heavy cloak of religious sin or communal disapproval. Was within this dangerous pursuit, this clandestine exploration of forbidden desires, that Eli's path converged with that of Barbara Raber, a woman of 41. 13 years Eli's senior, Raber existed in a world that lay just beyond the strict Amish boundary, yet remained intricately connected to it. As a Mennonite, she maintained a proximity to the plain communities, allowing her to live with the freedom of movement and access to modern technology that Eli could only dream of possessing openly. Her profession as an Amish taxi driver provided her with a unique and constant vantage point, regularly ferrying members of the community to towns, doctor's appointments, and grocery stores. Her dark sedan, a common sight on the dusty country roads that wound through Apple Creek, represented a literal and metaphorical bridge between two distinct worlds. She had seen countless Amish men and women step into her car, their faces etched with the quiet dignity of their lives, their mannerisms reserved and, for the most part, predictable. But when Eli Weaver stepped into her car for the first time, something shifted within her perception. He stood out. His youth and striking handsomeness were undeniable, even beneath the plain clothes and broad-brimmed straw hat that shadowed his face. His voice, calm and measured as he provided directions or discussed the destination, carried a subtle depth, a resonance that seemed to hint at complexities beneath his composed exterior. His dark eyes, though often downcast in the presence of an outsider, as was customary, held an unsettling intensity when they occasionally met hers, a flicker of something unquiet, something that drew Raber's attention more than any other passenger. She was a woman of quick wit and an easy laugh, accustomed to the general silence and solemnity of her Amish passengers, who rarely engaged beyond necessity. Eli, however, offered an unexpected spark. He responded to her light-hearted observations with a subtle smile, his replies sometimes hinting at a deeper understanding of the outside world than most Amish men. She found herself enchanted by this man who, despite his outwardly pious and traditional life, seemed to carry an unspoken hunger, a restless spirit she recognized as akin to her own, yet so carefully suppressed in him. She would find herself watching him in her rearview mirror, observing the way his hands, strong and calloused from farm work, rested on his lap, or the subtle tension in his jaw as he gazed out the window, as if seeing beyond the familiar fields. The progression from these innocent taxi rides to a clandestine passion was slow, almost imperceptible at first, a gradual blurring of lines. Then it gained a dangerous, accelerating momentum, fueled by the secret messages exchanged through Eli's hidden phone. What began as polite inquiries about her day or confirmations of future rides gradually deepened into something far more personal. The tone of their texts shifted. A shared observation about the mundane aspects of rural life would subtly segue into a more personal remark, a veiled compliment, a hint of admiration. Eli, ever astute and keenly aware of how he was perceived, sensed Raber's growing fascination. He understood the language of unspoken desires, the subtle signals of a woman drawn to his forbidden allure. He began to respond with an almost calculated warmth, weaving fragments of his carefully constructed Amish Stud persona into their conversations. He spoke of vague dissatisfactions with the simplicity and endless labor of his life, hinted at ambitions and desires that far exceeded the boundaries of the farm, and offered tantalizing glimpses into a world of suppressed emotion and quiet yearning. Raber, caught in the intoxicating thrall of this quiet, handsome Amish man who seemed so profoundly different from the others, responded with an eagerness that soon became abundantly apparent. Her messages grew longer, more frequent, sometimes arriving late into the night. She became a willing confidant, listening to his carefully chosen grievances, offering sympathy, and, crucially, offering an understanding that validated his nascent rebellion. Eli observed her reactions meticulously, testing the boundaries of her devotion with each carefully crafted message. He noted the increasing willingness in her tone, the way she would offer extra assistance, going out of her way to accommodate his schedule, sometimes driving longer distances or waiting for extended periods without complaint. He saw how she would adjust her own plans to align with his, how her replies came back with increasing speed and length. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible manipulation, a slow drawing out of her latent affections, a gradual fanning of the flames of her infatuation. He saw the adoration in her words, the fervent desire to please him, and a chilling realization began to settle upon him. Barbara Raber, a woman older than him, with a life entirely separate from his own, and a clear understanding of the severe consequences he faced, was falling deeply, irrevocably in love. And more than that, she seemed prepared to do almost anything for him, to cross boundaries she might never have considered for anyone else. As this understanding solidified into a cold certainty, the tenor of their secret conversations began to shift dramatically. The playful hints and flirtatious banter gave way to bolder inquiries, delving into territory far removed from simple friendship. Raber, emboldened by Eli's attention and her own escalating feelings, began to probe the depths of his dissatisfaction, pushing against the invisible walls that confined him. The questions she posed in her late-night messages, often couched in a casual, almost teasing tone, carried a subtle undercurrent of something far more profound, something dangerous. "Don't you ever wish you were free?" One message might have read, a seemingly innocent query that, in Eli's world, was nothing short of blasphemy, a direct challenge to his sworn vows. Another might question the limits of his life, asking if he ever dreamed of a different existence, a world without the endless physical labor and the strictures of their community, a life where he could simply be. Eli, sensing the profound depth of her devotion and her chilling willingness to follow him into increasingly darker territory, responded with an enigmatic gravity. He did not directly affirm a desire for freedom, for such a direct admission would be too dangerous, too revealing, too binding. Instead, his replies were carefully chosen, imbued with a vague, almost philosophical weight that allowed for multiple, unsettling interpretations. Freedom, sometimes, he might have written back, his fingers moving slowly across the tiny keypad in a dim, concealed light, his breath held, "comes at a great cost." Another message might have read, "Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed without severe consequences, without leaving a mark." These elliptical responses were not meant to deter her. Quite the opposite. They were meticulously designed to intrigue, to draw her deeper into the intricate web of his dissatisfaction, to suggest a shared burden, a tacit understanding of a desperate situation that only she could truly comprehend. He hinted at the enormous sacrifices required for true liberation, subtly priming her, preparing her for the unspoken horrors that lurked just beneath the innocent-sounding surface of his words, sowing seeds of a darker future. For months, their messages spiraled slowly downwards, a clandestine descent into a shared, burgeoning darkness. What began with idle chatter and flirtatious banter evolved, almost imperceptibly, into discussions about vague fantasies, then escalated into hushed explorations of stark, unsettling possibilities. The boundaries blurred. The lines between innocent longing and dangerous, destructive intent dissolved with each passing text, each late-night exchange. Eli, witnessing Raber's unwavering commitment, her increasingly fervent pledges of support and understanding, began to test her resolve with ever-increasing subtlety and daring. He described his home life with a growing sense of detachment, framing it as a suffocating cage, a prison of his own making. He presented himself as a trapped man, a helpless victim of circumstance, hinting at the profound desperation that simmered beneath his composed exterior, the deep sense of suffocation he claimed to feel as the relationship intensified, fueled by the intoxicating blend of forbidden desire and growing emotional manipulation. Eli's perspective on his wife, Barbara, began to undergo a chilling, almost unrecognizable transformation. The quiet, pious woman who shared his bed and mothered his 5 children, the woman he had once vowed to cherish before God and community, slowly ceased to be seen as a partner, a love, or even a wife in the traditional sacred sense. In the cold, calculating light of his newfound desires and Raber's unwavering, almost desperate devotion, Barbara became something else entirely, an impediment, an obstacle, a formidable living barrier standing squarely between him and the seductive, tantalizing promise of absolute freedom, a promise whispered to him through the glowing screen of a forbidden phone. The quiet harmony of the Weaver home, once a beacon of Amish virtue, had begun to crack under the unbearable weight of Eli's secrets, foreshadowing a devastating rupture that would soon shatter the profound, sacred silence of Apple Creek forever, replacing it with something far more chilling. The glowing rectangle of Eli Weaver's hidden cellular phone, a persistent and defiant beacon against the profound darkness of his Amish nights, had become more than a mere clandestine portal. It was the crucible where forbidden desires were forged into chilling, undeniable intent. Over the course of long, shadowed months that stretched into weeks and then days leading up to the unspeakable act, the messages exchanged between Eli and Barbara Raber underwent a sinister, horrifying metamorphosis. What began as a mere flirtation, a dangerous dance around the edges of possibility, a shared exploration of veiled grievances, gradually descended into a chillingly explicit discussion of life, death, and the ultimate transgression. Initially, their digital exchanges, conducted in the hushed hours when Apple Creek slept in profound quiet, painted vivid, seductive pictures of a life Eli claimed to crave. Raber's messages, fueled by a burgeoning, desperate passion that bordered on obsession, would describe idyllic futures, distant cities where anonymity offered absolute freedom from communal judgment, lives lived without the crushing weight of expectation, mornings waking beside each other, unburdened by secrets or the constant threat of discovery. She imagined him released from the endless toil of the farm, his face unlined by worry. Eli, in turn, would respond with vague affirmations, never fully committing to a tangible future, yet always fanning the flames of her desire. He hinted at the suffocating constraints of his own existence, meticulously framing Barbara, his wife, not as a loving partner, but as the unyielding, immovable barrier to this imagined paradise. These initial fantasies, though unsettling in their context, still held the gossamer veil of unreality, shimmering with possibility rather than concrete plan. Raber's words often carried a playful, yet increasingly urgent tone, probing Eli's deepest yearnings, asking if he truly wished to be free, or if he ever envisioned a life unburdened by his current vows, a life lived without the strictures of his faith. Eli's replies, always carefully measured, would speak of the profound, often unbearable cost of such freedom, a cryptic foreshadowing of the horrors to come, a price only she, in her devotion, seemed willing to consider as weeks bled into months. The playful inquiries and abstract longing gave way to a chillingly practical tone, a stark shift from reverie to cold calculation. The discussions in their messages transitioned from what-if scenarios to concrete how-to considerations. The word problem began to appear more frequently in their exchanges, implicitly and then explicitly referring to Barbara Weaver. Eli's messages became shorter, more direct, stripped of any lingering sentimentality or romantic illusion. He detailed his daily routines with precision, the exact layout of his home, the precise comings and goings of his family, the hours of deepest sleep, the moments of greatest vulnerability in the otherwise meticulously ordered Amish household. Raber's responses, once effusive and yearning, grew equally pragmatic, reflecting a grim, unsettling determination. The abstract fantasies of escape and freedom hardened into a stark, terrifying resolve, driven by her unwavering, almost fanatical devotion to Eli, a devotion that had eclipsed all moral boundaries. It was during this chilling period of collaborative plotting that Barbara Raber's personal computer, a device of everyday utility for her Mennonite life, began to house a chilling, indelible digital footprint. In the late hours of the night, long after her own husband had retired to bed, the soft, blue glow of the screen would illuminate her face, casting stark, unsettling shadows that danced with the flickering pixels. Her fingers, no longer merely tapping out messages of love and desire to Eli, now typed disturbing search queries into the digital void, a systematic exploration of depravity. The search history, later meticulously documented by investigators, revealed her terrifying descent into the darkest corners of human knowledge. Poisons that leave no trace, firearms silent, how to kill without leaving evidence, undetectable methods murder, causes of death no autopsy. She meticulously researched dosages, the physiological effects of various toxins, the legal ramifications of specific weapons, the decomposition rates of different substances under various conditions, even methods for confusing forensic analysis. Each search was a cold, calculated step, a methodical preparation for an act of profound, irreversible violence. Her eyes would scan the information, sometimes lingering on a particularly gruesome detail, sometimes quickly moving on with a dispassionate efficiency. A methodical process of gathering intelligence for a singular, sinister purpose. The sheer volume and specificity of these queries, documented by the Internet's relentless memory, painted a stark and disturbing picture of a mind deliberately seeking the precise tools and knowledge for destruction. The clinical detachment of these searches stood in terrifying contrast to the passionate, almost desperate messages she continued to send Eli, revealing a chilling duality within her, a capacity for both fervent love and cold, calculating malice. Concurrently, Eli Weaver, operating from the relative safety and secrecy of his hidden phone, began to issue precise, almost clinical instructions. His messages to Raber read like military directives, devoid of emotion or hesitation, each detail carefully considered for maximum impact and minimum risk. He detailed the optimal times for Raber to approach the Weaver property, usually in the deepest hours of the pre-dawn darkness, when the county slept most soundly, when no other buggies would be on the roads, when the farm animals were quiet in their stalls, their breathing soft and even. He outlined the specific routes she should take to avoid suspicion, preferring back roads and less traveled paths that would keep her car off the main thoroughfares, minimizing the chance of being seen by any early risers or passing farmers, any unexpected witness. He described the precise location where she could park her vehicle, a secluded spot hidden from the road by a dense cluster of trees, far enough to muffle the sound of an engine, yet close enough for a quick, unobserved approach to the house. And with a chilling lack of remorse that defied all reason, he provided the single, crucial detail that would seal Barbara Weaver's fate: the basement door. He specified that it would be left unlocked, a clear, silent invitation, an unbarred entry point into the heart of his home, into the sanctity of his marriage, and into the very life of his unsuspecting wife. These were not suggestions. They were orders accepted without question by Raber, who, in her desperate, misguided devotion, had become his willing, terrifying instrument. The culmination of these long, dark months of clandestine planning arrived with the evening of June 1st, 2009. The air over Apple Creek was warm and still, heavy with the humid scent of summer earth and distant blossoms, a deceptive tranquility. Eli moved through his evening routine with a practiced normalcy, his demeanor unchanged, his face a calm, impassive mask that betrayed nothing of the sinister machinations beneath. He ate supper with his family at the large wooden table, his gaze meeting Barbara's with a practiced emptiness she did not perceive, her mind focused on the children and the day's tasks. He played with his children in the yard for a short while, his laughter blending with theirs, the innocent sounds echoing in the wooden house, moments before he would irrevocably shatter their world. As dusk settled, blanketing the fields in deep shadow, Eli announced his plans for the night. He would go fishing. It was a common custom among Amish men, an activity that provided a plausible, unsuspicious reason for his absence from the home during the late hours, a seemingly innocent alibi that would deflect any immediate scrutiny. He prepared his tackle box with meticulous care, checked his fishing line for snags, and spoke of the promise of a good catch with an almost unsettling cheerfulness. His voice steady and even. As the night deepened, Barbara Weaver, exhausted from a day of endless chores, the canning, the mending, the tireless care of her 5 young children, and the constant demands of a bustling household prepared for bed. She moved through the quiet rooms, ensuring the children were settled, their small, even breaths filling the air with the innocence of sleep. She changed into her simple, modest nightgown, her lace cap carefully placed on the bedside table. Eli, having already made his preparations, moved with a quiet, predatory stealth around the house, ensuring the final horrific details were in place. He subtly adjusted window latches on the ground floor, ensuring they were secured. He cleared any potential obstacles from the path to the basement. He checked the main doors, confirming they were locked and bolted from the inside, leaving only the designated point of entry exposed and vulnerable. His movements were precise, efficient, devoid of any visible hesitation. Finally, he approached the master bedroom, its door slightly ajar. Barbara Weaver lay sleeping soundly in the large marital bed, her face soft and serene in the faint moonlight filtering through the window, her body deeply relaxed in the embrace of slumber. Beside her, in his wooden crib, the youngest child, less than a year old, slept deeply, his small body a picture of utter innocence, completely unaware of the looming shadow that had enveloped their home. Barbara was completely oblivious to the unspeakable fate that awaited her, unaware that the quiet rhythm of her breathing was being meticulously catalogued, her peaceful slumber an orchestrated vulnerability. Eli paused at the doorway, his eyes sweeping over the scene, his unsuspecting wife, his innocent child, his home a silent tableau of the life he was about to extinguish, irrevocably altering it forever. He turned the subtle, almost imperceptible click of the bedroom door latch, echoing in the heavy silence, closing off the room. His final act before leaving the house was the most chilling. He descended the short flight of wooden stairs to the basement door, a heavy, unpainted slab of timber that led to the cool earth below. With a deliberate, almost imperceptible movement, his hand wrapped around the cold metal of the latch, he ensured it was disengaged, pulling it back just enough to create a sliver of space, leaving the heavy wooden door purposely ajar, a silent, gaping maw in the heart of the home. It was an explicit invitation to the darkness, an awaiting entry point for the murderous lover, Barbara Raber, who would soon arrive under the deepest cloak of night, bringing with her the chilling promise of Eli's freedom, purchased at an unfathomable price, a price paid in blood. His footsteps then receded, a faint, almost ghostly scraping sound on the floorboards as he departed from the house, leaving behind the profound silence and the unsuspecting family, a profound quiet that was about to be violently and irrevocably broken. The profound quiet that had descended upon Apple Creek, Ohio, in the late hours of June 1st, 2009, was the kind of silence that seemed to absorb all sound, a deep, pervasive stillness typical of the rural Amish countryside. It was broken only by the chirping of crickets from the dew-laden fields and the whisper of the wind through distant oak trees. This was a silence usually associated with peace, with the turning of seasons, with the quiet sleep of a devout community. But beneath its surface, a different kind of quiet was brewing, a suffocating tension that gathered momentum with each passing minute. Miles away, through the network of unlit country roads, Barbara Raber drove her dark sedan. The vehicle cut a solitary path through the moonless night, its headlights carving narrow tunnels in the oppressive darkness. Her hands, clammy with perspiration, gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles appeared stark white against the faint glow of the dashboard. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, irregular rhythm that seemed to echo the drone of the engine, a sound barely audible in the vast expanse of the sleeping landscape. Her breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, catching in her throat, a physical manifestation of the terror and a distorted sense of purpose that coursed through her veins. Periodically, the small screen of her cellular phone, resting on the passenger seat, would illuminate, its muted glow catching her eye. Each time, a new message from Eli Weaver would appear, stark and unfeeling in its brevity. "She will be sleeping," one might have read, a cold, almost clinical reassurance. Another, arriving just a few miles from her destination, simply stated, "It is only to be done." These terse messages, stripped of any warmth or endearment, acted as a constant, insidious encouragement, a relentless push from the man who had woven her into his dark design. They were short, direct commands designed to solidify her resolve, to silence any lingering doubt that might surface in the terrifying solitude of her journey. Her eyes would dart to the screen, absorbing the words, allowing them to harden her purpose before snapping back to the dark road ahead. Following Eli's precise instructions, Raber guided her car down a less traveled gravel path. The crunch of the tires muted against the thick grass that bordered the track. The route led her to a secluded spot, hidden from the main road by a dense cluster of towering trees, their thick foliage providing an impenetrable screen against prying eyes. She cut the engine, plunging the immediate vicinity into an even deeper, more profound darkness, broken only by the distant, familiar sounds of the night. The sudden silence of the stopped engine felt deafening, amplified by the frantic beat of her own heart. She sat for a long moment, the silence of the countryside pressing in, absorbing the last traces of Eli's digital encouragement. Steadying herself, her movements from the car were slow, deliberate, each action calculated to minimize sound. The soft click of the door latch seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. She moved towards the Weaver home, a dark silhouette against the barely perceptible outline of the distant horizon. The familiar house, usually a beacon of quiet industry, now stood as a silent, ominous structure. Guided by Eli's earlier instructions, Raber approached the side of the house, where the old wooden basement door was located. As promised, it was not secured. The heavy timber, a dull, unpainted slab, stood ajar by a fraction of an inch, a sliver of darkness in the already profound gloom, a silent, gaping maw in the heart of the home. She pressed against it, and it swung inward with an almost imperceptible creak, revealing a deeper, cooler darkness within. The air that wafted from the basement carried the damp, earthy scent of stored preserves and old wood. Raber descended the worn wooden steps into the cellar, each footfall a deliberate placement to avoid any telltale squeak. The darkness inside was absolute, thick, and suffocating, absorbing all light. She moved with a strange, unnatural stealth, her hands blindly reaching for the solid comfort of the banister, guiding her up the inner staircase that led into the main living area of the house. Each step upwards was a slow, agonizing ascent, punctuated only by the strained rhythm of her own breathing, a ragged gasp of air that felt impossibly loud in her ears. The house above was utterly still. There were no sounds of movement, no creaking floorboards beyond her own, only the pervasive, almost terrifying quiet of a sleeping family. She navigated the unfamiliar layout of the ground floor, each shadow a potential obstacle, each piece of furniture a silent witness. The faint scent of home-baked bread, a residual warmth from the day's domesticity, hung in the air, a stark contrast to the cold purpose that now filled the space. Her path led her directly to the master bedroom, the door of which stood slightly ajar. Through the narrow gap, a faint, almost ethereal moonlight filtered in from the window, casting a soft, diffuse glow over the room. She paused at the threshold, her breath catching in her throat, her body rigid with a terrifying anticipation. The room was bathed in a semi-darkness that softened all harsh edges. On the large marital bed, Barbara Weaver lay in a deep, peaceful slumber, her face serene, turned slightly towards the side where a wooden crib stood. In the crib, the youngest child, less than a year old, slept soundly, his small, innocent form barely visible beneath the hand-stitched blankets. He was utterly oblivious, a pure, unblemished presence beside the woman whose life was about to be irrevocably stolen. Then the silence of the prey dawn broke. A single sharp crack, sudden and deafening, ripped through the profound quiet of the Weaver home, shattering the fabric of the night. It was a dry, percussive sound, too loud, too violent for the hushed fields of Apple Creek. The sound reverberated through the wooden structure, echoing off the walls, then seemed to be swallowed whole by the sudden, heavier silence that followed. For a moment there was nothing, only the lingering sensation of the violent disruption. The phantom sound still ringing in the ears. Almost immediately, the fragile quiet was broken again. From the crib beside the bed, a soft whimper began, a small, tentative sound that quickly escalated into a more insistent wail. The baby, roused by the sudden, violent noise, began to cry, his small, distressed voice cutting through the new, chilling stillness. The sound was weak at first, then gathered strength, becoming a sustained, piercing lament that filled the room, a harrowing counterpoint to the profound emptiness that had just been created. The cries grew louder, more desperate, a mournful declaration in the wake of an unthinkable act. And then there was only the sound of the baby's cries, echoing in the now violated room, growing in strength and urgency as the dark hours slowly gave way to the first pale light of dawn. As the morning light gradually bleached the eastern sky, painting the fields in hues of gray and soft gold, the cries from the Weaver home continued, persistent and heartbreaking. Within the house, the eldest son, a boy of perhaps 10 years, stirred from his own sleep. He was a reserved child, already carrying a maturity beyond his age, accustomed to responsibility. His daily routine, meticulously structured, involved rising early to assist his father with the morning chores in the barn. This morning, however, felt different. An unfamiliar anxiety tightened in his chest. He descended the stairs slowly, his bare feet making soft thuds on the worn wood, calling for his mother in a voice still thick with sleep. "Mama? Mama?" His calls went unanswered, swallowed by the unnerving quiet that pervaded the main living area. But then, above the strange silence, he heard it, the insistent, continuous wail of his youngest brother, growing louder, more frantic, emanating from the direction of his parents' bedroom. It was a sound he knew intimately, a cry of distress that usually meant hunger or discomfort, a sound that, on any other day, would have been swiftly soothed by his mother's presence. But today, it was a sound that guided him, an invisible thread pulling him towards the chilling reality that lay ahead. He moved towards the bedroom, his small hand pushing open the door, which was now slightly ajar. What he found within shattered the carefully constructed world of his childhood. Barbara Weaver's body lay slumped on the floor beside the bed, a dark, unnatural stain spreading across the antique carpet, a stark, violent contrast to the familiar patterns and muted colors. The room itself was still, imbued with an oppressive sense of violation. A faint, acrid smell of gunpowder hung heavy in the air, mingling sickeningly with the sweet, comforting scent of fresh baby's milk that lingered from the nearby crib. The scene was one of visceral horror, a tableau of domesticity abruptly and violently interrupted. The boy froze at the threshold, his eyes wide and uncomprehending, his small world collapsing around him. He did not cry out, did not move, but stood utterly still, his gaze fixed on the unimaginable sight. The image burned forever into his young mind. The persistent, piercing cries of his baby brother continued from the crib, the only living sound in a room that had just witnessed death. The news spread slowly at first, like a chilling whisper carried on the morning breeze, traveling across the quiet fields through horse and buggy, by hushed word of mouth. Shock rippled through the Amish community of Apple Creek, a wave of disbelief that turned to profound sorrow. They were a people accustomed to the simpler tragedies of rural life, an accidental injury, a sudden illness, the unpredictable cruelty of nature. But this was something entirely different, something unthinkable. The brutal violence of murder was an alien concept, a profound violation of their cherished peace, a sin of unimaginable proportion. Gathered outside the Weaver home, their faces etched with grief and confusion. Neighbors huddled in quiet groups, their gazes averted from the house. A shared sense of shame and profound sorrow weighing heavily upon them. The air was thick with unspoken questions, with an incredulity that transcended words. Then, a new intrusion broke the somber quiet. The arrival of official vehicles, their bright, flashing lights and almost garish spectacle against the muted landscape, shattered the sanctity of their morning. Police cruisers, an ambulance, and unmarked cars converged on the farm, their engines humming, their presence a jarring reminder of the outside world. This incursion by the authorities was, in itself, a scandal of immense proportion for the insular community. The sight of uniformed officers, their authoritative voices, their alien technology, further violated the peaceful rhythms of their existence. When they finally entered the Weaver home, they found more than just a brutal murder. They found undeniable evidence of a collision, a violent and irreversible crash between two distinct worlds. The sacred traditions of the Amish, built on faith and simplicity, and the profane desires of a man who had chosen to betray them both, dragging an outsider into his web of deceit, forever staining the quietude of Apple Creek. The sanctity of the home had been violated, not just by an act of violence, but by the insidious infiltration of a world they had so carefully sought to keep at bay. The profound quiet that had descended upon Apple Creek, Ohio, in the wake of the brutal murder of Barbara Weaver, was quickly replaced by a different kind of silence, the heavy, uneasy hush of a community grappling with the unthinkable. Police vehicles, their emergency lights no longer flashing, but their presence still an undeniable intrusion, ringed the Weaver farm. Uniformed officers moved with a methodical solemnity, their voices hushed, their movements a stark contrast to the usual gentle pace of Amish life. The initial hours of the investigation were marked by a palpable sense of perplexity. Detectives, accustomed to the complexities of urban crime, found themselves navigating an unfamiliar landscape, both physical and cultural. The Amish community, a bastion of peace and simplicity, offered no obvious motives for such a heinous act. Violence of this nature was virtually unknown, an anomaly that defied their understanding. Initial inquiries yielded little beyond expressions of profound grief and bewildered shock from the neighbors. No one had seen anything suspicious. No one could fathom an enemy for Barbara Weaver, a woman known for her piety and dedication. The officers meticulously processed the scene within the Weaver home. The bedroom, once a sanctuary, was now a tableau of devastation. The dark stain on the antique carpet, the lingering, acrid smell of gunpowder mingling with the faint, sweet scent of baby's milk, and the chilling emptiness where a life had been. The baby's cries, now hushed and replaced by the soft cooing of a relative who had taken him, had been the first, loudest alarm, guiding the eldest son to a scene that would forever haunt his waking thoughts. The initial stages of the investigation were slow, painstaking. Detectives sifted through the remnants of a peaceful life, looking for any sign, any anomaly that could point to an intruder from outside the community, a runaway, a disgruntled former employee, a stranger passing through. The idea that such brutality could emanate from within the close-knit Amish world seemed unfathomable, a betrayal of everything they understood about human nature in this particular context. For days, the quiet fields echoed with the foreign sound of official radios, the measured discussions of investigators, and the unfamiliar tread of police boots. Then, a crucial detail emerged, a small, anachronistic object that would unravel the entire, carefully constructed facade. During a systematic search of the Weaver property, an officer, sifting through the clutter of Eli's workshop, a space filled with tools, wood shavings, and the scent of hard labor, discovered it. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard, precisely where Eli had often concealed it, was a small, sleek cellular phone. For the Amish community, this device was a forbidden artifact, a direct link to the worldly temptations they so rigorously eschewed. For the investigators, it was a sudden, blinding flash of light in the darkness, an unexpected window into a hidden life. The simple fact of its existence was, in itself, a scandal of immense proportion, a violation of the Amish strictures that immediately cast a shadow of suspicion upon Eli Weaver. The discovery initiated a new, more focused phase of the investigation. Forensic technicians meticulously extracted data from the device. What they found was a digital chronicle of Eli Weaver's descent into depravity, a chilling testament to his double life. Hundreds of messages, a vast, undeniable tapestry of communication, had been exchanged between Eli and Barbara Raber. The police painstakingly reviewed each entry, charting the sinister progression of their secret relationship. Some messages, particularly in the earlier stages, appeared almost banal, typical flirtations or logistical arrangements for rides. They spoke of mundane details, of the weather, of upcoming events, of small, everyday occurrences. But gradually, insidiously, the tone shifted. The digital exchanges darkened, becoming cold, calculating, and ultimately explicit in their sinister intent. The later messages were devoid of sentimentality, stripped bare to a chilling, tactical efficiency. They contained precise instructions, times for a rendezvous, routes to take, confirmations of plans. Eli's words, once vague and subtly manipulative, had become direct orders. "She will be sleeping," one message read, a chilling affirmation of Barbara Weaver's vulnerability. Another, "The basement door is unlocked." These were not expressions of love or longing, but the cold, hard directives of a conspirator, dismantling Eli's initial attempts to portray himself as a bewildered, grieving victim. When questioned, Eli attempted to maintain his carefully crafted persona, claiming he was merely venting, that he never truly wished for any of the horrors that had transpired. But the digital evidence spoke a different language, a cold, hard truth that defied his feigned innocence. The sheer volume and explicit nature of the messages painted an undeniable picture of premeditation and shared culpability. The investigation then led authorities to Barbara Raber's home, where another crucial piece of the puzzle awaited. Her personal computer, a tool of everyday modern life, revealed a chilling digital footprint. A forensic examination of its hard drive uncovered a meticulous, horrifying record of her internet searches. The browsing history contained a litany of disturbing queries, a systematic exploration of methods for murder. Terms like poison, shotgun, how to kill without leaving evidence, and undetectable methods murder appeared repeatedly, logged with a cold, almost clinical precision. These searches, meticulously timed and dated, provided irrefutable proof of her active, willing participation in the plot, transforming abstract fantasies into a concrete plan for murder. The digital evidence from both Eli's phone and Raber's computer formed an undeniable narrative, connecting the threads of their conspiracy with chilling clarity. The carefully laid plans, once whispered in the dark, were now laid bare in the unforgiving light of a police investigation. The legal proceedings that followed captivated the surrounding counties, drawing a morbid fascination from the outside world. The trial itself became known as a silent spectacle. The courtroom, usually a place of impassioned arguments and emotional outbursts, took on an almost reverent quiet when members of the Amish community attended. They sat in the public gallery, dressed in their traditional, plain clothes, their faces etched with a profound sorrow and an unbearable sense of shame. Their gazes were often averted, their bodies still, betraying no outward emotion. There were no shouts, no tears, no public displays of outrage or grief. Only a heavy, palpable silence hung in the air, thick with the weight of communal pain and a profound sense of betrayal. The dignity of their silence, however, was more powerful than any outburst, conveying the depth of their suffering and the unimaginable transgression against their deeply held values. The presence of the Amish witnesses and observers served as a stark, moral counterpoint to the ugly revelations unfolding in the courtroom. When the verdicts were finally read and the sentences pronounced, the silence only deepened. Barbara Raber was convicted and sentenced to 23 years in prison for her role in the murder. Eli Weaver, the man who had traded his faith for forbidden desire and his freedom for a heinous crime, was sentenced to life in prison. In the moments following the pronouncements, there were no triumphant cheers from the prosecution side, no cries of outrage from the defense. The courtroom remained hushed. The members of the Amish community simply lowered their heads, their faces now shielded from public view, accepting the grim pronouncements with a quiet resignation. Then, slowly, deliberately, they rose and exited the courtroom, their departure as silent and orderly as their arrival. The silence returned, not the peaceful quiet of Apple Creek, but something far more dense, more chilling, a permanent scar on the landscape of their community in the years that followed. The legacy of the tragedy settled heavily upon Apple Creek. The Weaver home, once a vibrant center of family life and industry, was left abandoned. No other Amish family would consent to live there. Its windows remained dark, its fields untended, gradually succumbing to the encroachment of weeds and wild growth. A profound sense of unease settled around the property, a tangible aura of sorrow and unspoken horror. Locals, both Amish and English, spoke of strange occurrences, of horses inexplicably shying away from the road they passed the house during the dark hours of night, their instincts seemingly repelled by an unseen presence. They claimed that oil lamps carried past the property sometimes flickered and extinguished on their own, plunging passers-by into sudden, chilling darkness. Local workers, Those brave enough to venture near the neglected property swore they had seen spectral figures. Some recounted glimpses of a woman in a long, plain blue dress, standing motionless on the dilapidated porch, her arms cradling something unseen, as if rocking the baby who would never again awaken to his mother's touch. Others spoke of a faint, mournful crying sound emanating from the dark depths of the basement, a low, sorrowful wail that seemed to carry on the wind, a sound heard most distinctly when the wind shifted, causing the old, heavy basement door to creak ominously on its rusted hinges, opening slightly as if to reveal the source of the unending grief. Eli Weaver, the man whose restless heart had sown seeds of evil, remained imprisoned, his forbidden phone and illicit desires having cost him everything. But among the tranquil, rolling fields of Ohio, his name transcended mere criminal notoriety. It became a chilling synonym for something the Amish rarely spoke of aloud: the insidious nature of evil, a malevolence that did not always arrive from the outside world, but could fester and bloom from within, born not from external forces, but from the corrupted depths of one's own heart. And in that forsaken house, where once the soft murmur of prayers and the joyful patter of children's footsteps had filled the air, there were those who swore that, even years later, a phantom echo of a single gunshot still cut through the deepest silence of the pre-dawn hours, a haunting, eternal reminder that even in the purest of places, the whispers of hell could find a way to break through, leaving a chilling, indelible mark. The quiet of Apple Creek, once a blanket of profound peace, was irrevocably torn by a desire that festered in the shadows, erupting in a single devastating sound. Justice, in its cold, earthly form, eventually delivered its verdicts, consigning Eli Weaver and Barbara Raber to years behind formidable walls. Yet, the true cost of their transgression continues to manifest in the unsettling quiet that now shrouds the abandoned Weaver home. Horses inexplicably shy from its road, spectral figures are rumored to linger on its dilapidated porch, and a baby's phantom cry sometimes escapes the forgotten cellar. The physical boundaries of their sentences could not contain the lingering stain upon the land, nor the profound questions this tragedy ignited within the hearts of those who witnessed it. The weight of betrayal and profound loss settled like a permanent fog, altering the very air of a place once defined by unwavering faith. This chronicle, etched into the placid landscape of Ohio, serves as a stark and chilling testament. It suggests that true malevolence does not always arrive from the outside, cloaked in unfamiliarity. Instead, it can slowly, insidiously, bloom from within, nurtured by hidden desires, even in places deemed most pure and untouched by the world's corruption. Eli Weaver's name became a whispered caution, a stark reminder that the inferno can indeed whisper from the very heart, breaking a profound silence in its wake, and leaving an echo that can never truly be silenced. Considering the devastating cascade of events, from a hidden phone to a shattered home, what thoughts does this story stir within you about the unseen depths of human desire and the true meaning of freedom? Share your reflections in the comments below. If the echoes of this tragedy have resonated within you, we invite you to explore another chilling account of lives irrevocably altered by hidden transgressions. You can find it next on our channel. Do not let these stories fade into the profound quiet. If this narrative held your attention, leave a like and subscribe to Host of Silence to ensure you do not miss our future journeys into the enigmatic corners of documented terror.